Okay, so if you've ever gotten the inside scoop on getting a PhD degree, then you may have heard that it could take like forever and that the timeline can be really unpredictable. In this video, I'm going to give you a 4-part framework that you can use to increase the predictability and get out of there in a reasonable amount of time. Hi, I'm Ryan Sinnett. Welcome to my channel. Now this may seem obvious, it's maybe obvious in retrospect, but the overall point is you need to make a plan and actually execute it. And while you're doing so, you need to communicate with stakeholders. So I'm going to split this up, like I said, into a 4-part framework. But understand that this is just the gist of it, and this really will apply to anything you do for the most part, especially anything you do that's collaborative. First of all, what exactly do you need to do to get your degree? Well, you don't know, do you? Maybe you know, maybe you think you know. Now, again, there's so many different circumstances that this could vary based on your program, your field, your advisor, your institution, and so on. So I can't really tell you what you need to do, but the point is you need to figure out what you need to do. The first phase of the framework is something that you would also do in engineering, and I call it requirements gathering or requirements specification. The point is, what exactly do you have to do to graduate from your program? You don't even know. There might be a couple classes that might be really easy to figure out, but maybe your advisor wants you to write some papers. And so there's so many different factors that can influence the requirements for your graduation that I can't really tell you what you need to do. You need to talk to different graduate students, talk to people who have graduated with the same advisor or similar advisors at your institution, and really try to get an understanding of what the requirements are. Document those requirements. You really want to get total clarity on this. Once you understand those requirements, show them to other people. Say, does this look right to you? Am I missing anything? Try to get as much feedback as possible and figure out where you're going wrong. Because one of the biggest problems in engineering, and the same thing that'll apply to your PhD program, is if you misunderstand the requirements, you're going to do the wrong thing. And then whatever you did may not actually contribute toward you graduating. So make sure you understand the requirements clearly before you actually lay out the plan and start executing on it. Now, the requirements may change over time. In engineering, that's called requirements creep or scope creep. And a lot of times that can happen because you don't understand the requirements clearly at the beginning. Although, of course, it could change due to different circumstances. Like, let's say you change research groups, change advisors. This new advisor may have different requirements, what they want to see from you in order for you to graduate. So just bear in mind that, as time changes, requirements are more and more likely to change. The next part of the framework, step 2 of the framework, is negotiation. Regardless of what the requirements are, they're up for negotiation. You can debate what they are. It might be like, I'm going to make a research contribution of this magnitude. I'm going to do 3 conference papers and a journal paper. And maybe that's enough. And you can go and figure that out and negotiate based on that with your advisor, with your committee, assuming you've already established your committee. And you'll go and you'll figure it out and you'll negotiate. Once you've got the requirements clearly understood and really agreed upon, and basically by talking to the different stakeholders, which in this case are your committee members, and getting them to agree that, yeah, these are a reasonable set of requirements, now you can actually go ahead and make a plan based on these requirements. Step 3 of this framework is planning. Once you've got the requirements clearly understood, you've got them documented, you've spoken to the committee members, probably one-on-one. You don't typically have these big meetings of committee members, so you've probably spoken to them one-on-one, not just through email. You've spoken face-to-face whenever possible, and you've gotten them to agree these are reasonable requirements. Okay, now what you can do is you can set out a plan. So phase 3, planning, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to figure out, well, what do I need to do? And then you're going to want to create milestones and ways to track those milestones. And they have to be measurable, okay? If you're doing 3 conference papers, that's measurable. But if you're saying, I'm going to make a research contribution, that's not measurable until you create a way to measure it. So if it's measured in terms of 3 conference papers and a journal article, well, that's a way to measure it. Unfortunately, planning is something you don't really learn in school. There's no classes on this. Maybe if you take a project management course, but this is something you don't really learn, and it's something that's really critical in graduate school. It'll really boost you forward, but you're definitely going to have to learn to do it when you get into the industry, because businesses need to operate, with a schedule, and you need to get things done on time. And in order to get things done on time, you need to know what that even means. So thus planning. So for planning, one effective way to look at this is, hey, these are the things I need to achieve at the end of the plan of the work. So work your way backwards. What set of milestones do you have to achieve in order to make that plan complete? And so let me give you an example. If your plan culminates in you defending your thesis, That means before you defend your thesis, you have to have written your dissertation. And in order to write your dissertation, you had to have done a certain amount of work, submitted papers. In fact, for your committee to even agree to hold your defense, to allow you to hold your defense, you're going to have gone through a good percentage of the requirements, maybe all of them, except maybe finishing up a couple of papers. So let's say you formed what you think is a reasonable plan. Now we move into step 4. And step 4 of this framework is communication. And this is something that's going to be ongoing. And this is really critical, so pay attention. What you want to do is you want to take your plan, you want to speak to your committee members individually about your plan, get them to agree, get them aligned on the plan. But be aware, they're going to have feedback most likely if you take this approach. They're going to say, well, I don't know if this will work because of this. So be prepared to take their feedback. Let's say you have a meeting with one of your committee members. The committee member gives you feedback. First thing you should do after that meeting, go back to your office, write an email. Hey, here's a summary of our meeting. You gave me some really good feedback. Here's what it is. I'm going to take this feedback. I'm going to update my plan accordingly. And let's reconvene now once I've taken in your feedback next week. And put a date. Don't just say, let's reconvene. Give it a specific date and then hold yourself to that date. And now when you're doing this communication, when you're doing this planning phase, make sure you understand that negotiation is tied into this. Like, they may want you to do all of this, but that may be unreasonable, right? Maybe it's just reasonable for you to do this much, and that should be enough for you to earn a PhD. And what's reasonable? Well, you could talk to other graduate students and understand what the norm is. Be prepared to negotiate on this. One effective tactic in negotiation is called anchoring. And what it is a psychological phenomenon where you come in with an initial offer, and psychologically people are anchored to that offer. So what you can do is do something called anchoring low. So come in, and you've probably heard this expression, under promise and over deliver. So you can come in, if you think they're probably going to want you to write 4 conference papers, you can say, I'm going to write 2 conference papers. And then they're going to be like, well, you really need to write 4. And then, okay, fine, I agree, I'll write 4. But if you come in saying, oh, I'm going to write 4 papers, or even be aggressive and say, I'm going to write 5, well, they'll hold you to that. In fact, they may even say, well, I want to negotiate a little bit, so you need to write 6. So make sure you don't come in with your final offer in terms of what you think you need to do to graduate. If you do, you're really just putting yourself in a weak position and you're going to having to do more work. So take this approach, talking with your committee members, work through all of them, get alignment on the plan. And once you have alignment on the plan, send it out to them, get them to agree to it in email. This is what we discussed. You said this would be a reasonable path for me to graduate. I understand there could be, minor deviations from this plan, but roughly speaking, if we were to go forward with this plan, if I were to go forward with this plan and execute on it, that would put me in a very reasonable position to graduate. And so once you've got all of them agreeing on it, now you've got it in email. You could even send an email to the entire committee saying, well, I thank you everyone for your input. It was especially helpful in formulating this plan for my course of study. What I landed on was the following plan, and we've all agreed that this will be a reasonable plan for me to graduate. Now when it comes time to graduate, you're not going to get delayed because everybody already agreed to the plan. So the only thing that matters now is you have to put your head down and execute on this plan, follow and track your milestones, and don't miss your dates. Now as you're executing your plan, communication is going to be really important throughout the whole thing. And again, this is something that carries on beyond just doing your PhD. This is something that's really useful in the industry as well. Be over-communicative with your stakeholders, okay? So maybe what that means is, hey, these are my milestones that I'm going to achieve. Depending on the length of time between the milestones, you probably should definitely send, hey, I completed this milestone and these were the results and so on every time you hit a milestone. And in fact, if your milestones are a little bit longer, then maybe you want to just send an email out every quarter. Maybe you want to meet up with them, request for 15, 30 minutes to meet up with them, and just as you're working through your plan over 3 to 5 years, let's say, go and take them along on the journey with you. In fact, you can even get feedback from them. Actually, they kind of know this stuff, so they could probably even give you useful feedback that could help inform your research. You don't need to do that, but if you take them along on the ride and over communicate, you're going to have a lot better results when you ask them, hey, am I ready to graduate? Now, you may miss a milestone, okay? These are meant to be intermediate measures to track progress. You're not perfect at planning. Things can change. So what you want to do is you want to think through the contingencies, right? What's going to happen if your plan doesn't go exactly according to plan? It's like Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until he gets punched in the face. When it comes to thinking through contingencies, what you can do is you can try to front load your work. So let's say you need 5 papers to graduate. Try to get those done early. Let me give you an example of a time I had a problem. One time I wrote this conference paper for the American Controls Conference, ACC. And it was a pretty interesting paper, some novel theory in it, good figures and everything, good simulation results. But then I was trying to prove something formal, and so I got to the review stage and the reviewers had some concerns. I addressed those concerns and then got through it and was about to publish the paper. But then I realized there was an irreconcilable flaw in the theorem and there was just no way to fix it. And so I actually had to end up pulling that paper. And so I had to basically abandon that avenue of research, that idea. Fortunately, I'd already written many other papers and that research was only a minor that paper was almost an afterthought. But if I had been relying on that paper to graduate and if I had been coming upon the deadline of actually graduating, that could have presented a major challenge for me. So by front loading the work, I was able to avoid this issue of, oh, well, you need to write additional papers in order to graduate. Okay, so that's the framework that I suggest to students to use to reduce the uncertainty in PhD, to reduce the scheduling uncertainty, and to get out of there quickly. First, get those requirements clear, then negotiate what the scope of work with your committee, do some planning, and communicate the whole time. If you follow these rules, you're not guaranteed to get out in any amount of time, but I can put it to you that this framework is going to be a lot better than just guessing and just kind of going along step by step without looking ahead. If you liked the video, please don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel for future videos. Leave some comments below. Do you have any other ways that you think that students should be using to get through graduate school quickly? What were the tricks and tips that you used to get through school? Or what are the tricks that you're currently using if you're a graduate student? If you think this video could be helpful for someone you know, make sure to share it with them and I'm sure they'll appreciate it. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.